Welcome back. Now, the Nigerian government has raised alarm that 30 states of the Federation and the Federal Capital Territory are currently at risk of flooding, reminiscent of last Thursday's flood in Mokwa local government area of Niger State, north-central Nigeria. Now, the Mokwa floods, triggered by heavy rainfall and heightened by the effects of climate change, killed over 200 people, destroyed homes, and displaced thousands of residents, as well as washed away 2 bridges and 2 roads. Very key bridges and roads now, by the way. Many are still missing as rescue operations continue in the town. The Minister of Water Resources and Sanitation, Joseph Usev, who raised the flood alarm at a briefing in Abuja, clarified the flood in Mokwa was not caused by any release of water from Kainji and Jeba dams, but by heavy rainfall. He cited the non-compliance to flood warnings and inadequate drainage systems in the town as contributing factors. He also referred to the report of 2025 Annual Flood Outlook, which indicated that 1,249 communities in 147 local government areas in 33 states and the FCT fall within the high flood risk areas, while 2,187 communities in 293 local government areas in 31 states of the Federation, including the Federal Capital Territory, fall within the moderate flood risk areas. Now, the flood disaster in Mokwa mirrors previous incidents in other parts of Nigeria, including Borno State in northeast of the country, where at least 150 persons died in 2024 following the Alu Dam collapse as a result of heavy rain. Well, let's discuss this further. I'm now being joined on the program by environmentalist Desmond Majakodumi. He joins us, of course, from Lagos. Mr. Majakodumi, thank you very much for coming on the program, and thanks for talking to us on issues as this, as always. Quite unfortunate what happened in Mokwa, and then you have this, well, should I call it a very stark and probably frightening warning now from the government that we should expect more. I mean, 30 states to be affected. Several communities could face flooding as serious as the one we saw at Mokwa.
Oh, absolutely. And even the flooding that happened in Mokwa, we were warned about that many years ago, several decades ago, in fact. The meteorological scientists, international scientists have started warning humanity that if we continue what we're doing with this massive amounts of pollution into the atmosphere, definitely we would be vulnerable to the global warming, which would cause massive rainfall. And this is exactly what is happening. Its only difference is that it's happening a little bit earlier than they had warned it would happen. It's speeded up. And it's not just us, Mokwa, in Nigeria. It's other countries of the world. In fact, in Valencia, Spain, they had 1 year's rainfall fell in 8 hours. It totally overwhelmed the whole territory. It carried cars as if they were little pebbles and just chucked them all over the place. So yes, we were warned, but unfortunately, we didn't adhere the warning. We were trying to deny the reality of the situation on ground. And that reality is that more heat in the planet, you're going to get more water evaporating. It's only logical. If you get more water evaporating, you're going to get heavier rain falling. In fact, some people in the UN are classifying it not as rainfall anymore. They're calling it the rain bomb. And yes, we have been warned that there's going to be a lot more of these incidents happening. A few of them will happen this year. More will happen next year. And in the next 2-3 years to come, this is what we have to be very, very worried about. Because if we don't tackle this situation that is affecting the atmosphere of our planet, we're in for big trouble, not just us here in Nigeria, but the whole of humanity. Global warming is real.
How does one explain this? We're not the biggest polluters in the world, But we seem to be bearing the brunt. You look at Mokwa, for instance. I mean, you ask yourself how much pollution actually comes from that community. But then for them to have just a few hours of rain and have that deluge that swept everything on its path, I mean, it's baffling.
Yes, it is. Well, it just goes to show that we are one global family. And what we do in one part of the world, it can have a tremendous effect in another part of the world. We're all on this planet, and to be honest, it's a tiny planet when we look at it in relation to the cosmos. Within our own solar system, it's one of the smaller planets. But when you look at it within our galaxy, it's just a tiny speck. There's billions of planets in our one galaxy. But it's a pretty special planet because with all the telescopic research, infrared, and so on that we've been doing over the last few decades, we've come to the realization that this planet, so far, is the only one that has the capacity to support life the way it does, the kind of life that we know. And what's been happening on this little earth is that, one part of the world has been responsible for a tremendous amount of pollution, especially the carbon dioxide pollution. The people, who started the Industrial Revolution with burning massive amounts of coal, and then later on, other fossil fuels, when they were able to refine the oil into diesel and petrol and so on. Massive amount in order to give them the energy that drove the Industrial Revolution and is now producing electricity all over the world. It put hundreds of millions of tons of this greenhouse gas, carbon dioxide, into our atmosphere. Now, carbon dioxide is in our atmosphere in a small sort of level, about 280 parts per million. That is 280 atoms of CO2 for every other million parts of the other gas. There's quite a lot of gas out there in the atmosphere. That's before the Industrial Revolution. But because of this massive burning of the coal and the oil, derivatives and so on, we've now pushed it. It's edging over 400 parts per million in the atmosphere. And this is causing massive global warming, and it happens all over the world. And we just happen to be one of the more unfortunate people that have caught a taste of that global warming quite recently in our Mokwa. But we're not the only one. This kind of rainfall, because again, we remind ourselves, if you add heat to water, you're going to get evaporation, more rain. So it's unfortunate, it's not really fair, because we contributed not very much, although we're starting to contribute quite a lot. However, the big mistake that we've made to contribute to the situation is massive deforestation. Nigeria has the most rapid deforestation rates in the whole world. And as I'm sure you probably know, forests are nature's way of absorbing the CO2, because human beings, when we breathe out, and other mammals, when they breathe out, we give out CO2. But nature has a way of balancing herself and absorbing that CO2. And one of the ways that she does that is for the work of the forest. So we have now been destroying what could have been sequestering this CO2. And on top of that, I don't think the infrastructure in the Mokwa area was at all sufficient, although this type of rain would overwhelm whatever infrastructure was there. And finally, we've been causing too much damage to our rivers and streams. Again, they are the natural conveyors of, when rain does fall, they end up in the streams and the rivers. We take them to the lakes, lagoons, and to the oceans. What we've been doing is we've been silting up these rivers and streams. So, there's more sort of soil and sand and things. So the bed is higher. They don't have the capacity to carry as much water because of the erosion. And the erosion has been caused because of the destruction of plant life near them. Again, another thing that the trees do, as if just absorbing the carbon dioxide
Let me ask you. Let me ask
and
you
giving
this.
us
Sorry to interject, but
oxygen. It
let
wasn't
me
enough.
ask you this.
The roots are
You
causing
said, and the
erosion.
federal government too has come. I mean, you said, look, there had been warnings about what happened in Mokwa, but obviously these warnings were not heeded. And so every now and then, the Nigerian Meteorological Agency now issues advisories and what have you. And for instance, now the 2025 annual flood report is out. Why is it difficult for people to hit these warnings? For instance, with the 2025 annual flood report, we know places that are clearly at risk. But then nothing happens until the disaster comes.
Yeah, well, there's just sluggishness in the bureaucratic system in terms of, probably lack of empathy coming from the decision maker. That's also a bit of a challenge. But, when people who have been living in an area for a long time, many, many years, if it's like maybe a decade or so, and it's a so-called floodplain area, and then you're telling them, oh, you have to move. Where do they move to? Where do they move to? When there's more of a responsible attitude from the leadership, they ensure that they provide locations for these people to move to. But just to give people warning, you have to move out of your place because there could be some flooding. That's not enough. Okay, where am I going? It's a difficult one, but it has to be done in the right way with far more empathy from the governing body. Part of the challenge I think they're having is them to understand the job description, which is they are all civil sovereign. Yeah. So you're serving the needs and the interests of the people. And, this needs to get through to them as opposed to just feeling, well, okay, me, I'm the other. No. You're there to serve. And if you don't do a good job serving, then you're also going to be subject to fundamental laws of life. Those laws say that every action begets a reaction. So what actions have you been doing? And be wary of the reaction. Make sure that you get a good reaction. Get blessings and not curses.
So with this report now issued by the government, what should those areas that have been mentioned now, what should they be doing? What should be happening there? Because it's pretty obvious that the rain will come, and we're going to have the deluge, and the flood will definitely come. So what do you expect, especially learning from Mokwa now? What should be happening at these places, especially those places that are at high risk of severe flooding?
Yeah, very good question. The challenge that they're having is that even though they have an idea of places that are at high risk, because of the whole global warming situation, where you're having these, rain bombs that can form just about anywhere, it's getting more difficult to accurately predict that, okay, this place will have overwhelming flooding. There are some areas, by the rivers and the big streams, which you can be pretty sure. So the first thing, as I say, prevention is better than cure.
Sure.
And we need to see those streams and rivers dredged. Yes. The capacity for them to remove the water has been reduced because of all the erosion that has gone on, and the level of the riverbeds have been raised, as we mentioned earlier. And this should have happened, all during the dry season. It's a huge indictment that it hasn't happened in most of those rivers and the stream, that the dredging, giving them more capacity to carry the water hadn't been going on. That's number one big indictment. Number two is that, yes, where will the people go to? The government, it's an emergency. It's a serious matter. And the government definitely has to provide alternative places that are on as high land as possible in order that people will have some place to take refuge. I know this is very, very expensive. And, maybe they're feeling, well, the funds are not available. And our hope and our prayer is that this year will not hit too many of our people too hard.
It's something we all hope for. It's really something we hope for. Mr. Desmond Maja-Kudumi, thank you very much for coming on the show, and thanks for talking to us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually My utmost pleasure. But just on a final note,
Yeah.
the silver lining on the awful dark cloud of Mokwa is that at least everybody is now acknowledging that this
Yeah.
is a symptom, it's a manifestation of climate change. Prior to this, people were in denial. They were actually denying the obvious. 2 + 2 = 4. If you have more heat in the earth, you're going to have far more rain. So at least we have acknowledged that climate change is here. What we now need to get through our consciousness is that it's not just going to go away tomorrow or next year or the year after. Humanity has to get together and do the right thing to ensure that we stop damaging our very life support system in the way that we are. We have to come together, and that's the silver lining, because when we come together with the right attitude, we will stop putting profit ahead of people and planet, and we will put people ahead of that, and the planet ahead of that. How can you justify wrecking your life support system just to get some extra money? It's not acceptable, and the consequences are there. The consequences are there in the physics and in the metaphysics. Check out the scripture. They're all talking about retribution. They're talking about kifara. They're talking about karma. So leaders, beware.
Thank you very much, Mr. Majakudumi. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, that's how much we can take on the program this week. We thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.